Welcome everyone to the next in our TitanTV in lieu of NAB series, webinar series. Today the topic is Addressable Asset Identification Standard for NextGen Distribution. And I have a few guests with me. Before we get to those though, just as a reminder, if you have any questions throughout the entire webinar, encourage you go to the chat or the question and put them in there. We'll actually be answering questions throughout the webinar, and we will have some time at the end to also answer additional questions. And as a reminder, we will be sending out this link to this video. We'll be recording it. We'll send it out to everyone that registered. And then we'll also put it on our TitanTV YouTube channel. So make sure if you missed it or you want to pass it on, either look for the email or go to our YouTube channel. So with that all being said, I will start. I am Heidi Steffen, the Chief Revenue Officer here at TitanTV. Our part of it, we'll be talking about the MediaStar part. So if you're a MediaStar user, this should be exciting for you. With that, I'm going to pass it off to Jim to introduce himself.
Hello, everybody. I'm Jim DeChant with News Press and Gazette Company. I'm the Vice President of Technology and handle our broadcast operations in 10 locations around the country. Good to see everybody today. So today we're going to talk about the asset identification system. Heidi, if you want to advance the slide, that'd be great. I think it's delayed. So basically the asset identification system, asset identification system seeks to address problems with live linear television and customization. Basically performing content replacement in live events can be difficult, and frankly, they're very unpredictable. So you don't know what's coming next. And because of that, valuable opportunities are lost for both, potential ways to enhance a viewer experience or for us to enhance advertising content. Many people don't watch television or live linear events on television sets anymore. They use other devices. In fact, upwards of 65% of them use mobile devices, desktop devices, and most likely are consuming those within an application. As we move forward into next-gen television, almost everyone will be using some kind of an application to consume media. And at some points, they might even be using multiple devices at the same time to consume media. This kind of creates a lot of complexity. If you want to advance, Heidi, that'd be great. So serving ads and content on both client side and server side systems can be somewhat complex and leads to missed opportunities because we just don't, the content replacement engines, those downstream enhancement services may not know what's coming up next or may not know the rules around that specific media. So to address this, we've created a project, and that project's called the Addressable Asset Identification Standard for NextGen Distribution, or AAIS. And that service is really looking to improve this process by registering and utilizing unique IDs for content and ads, and really optimize monetization as well as user experience. And if we can jump into the next slide, I'll show you, we'll talk about it. So this is the AAIS workflow for NextGen Distribution. It's really built around what was a traditional live linear process that we use today. So today, if you were a broadcaster, you're going to build a log out, which that log would include all the services. So maybe it's a KTVZ, NBC, Bend, Oregon, and all of its assets. So it's network programming, live local news, or syndication like Live with Kelly. And that log is built in a linear way. So it's a list of clips, and that list of clips includes both program and commercials, and that's sent to an automation system, which then mixes all those different types of content into a program stream, and you watch it. It's all good until you try to do live linear or replacement content on the back end. So a couple things when you go to do a replacement, you need to know is there a viewer watching it? What service are they watching? What kind of content are they watching? And maybe if you're lucky enough, you'll know a little bit about the context of that user. Are they interested in one product over another, or something else? Or maybe they even are in a situation where we need to tell them something like a enhanced piece of alerting or something that might affect them in their environment. To do that, you really need to identify those assets. So the AAIS workflow is basically integrated into the traditional linear system. So the traffic system builds this list of clips that I just talked about, the list of events. From there, the system reaches out to a data mapper, and that data mapper interfaces with a couple of services. One is EIDR, and EIDR is a content and service registry. So, you know, channel 21 in Bend is an NBC, that we know that by the service registry, and it's airing these different shows. Could be the Today Show, let's say. So I've got that, but I've also got local events like local news, and those may or may not be registered in the EIDR service. In this case, the traffic system interfaces with the data mapper. The data mapper says, is this asset registered? Is this service registered? If it's not, let's register it. And then it can also, we can also add and or retrieve very specific information about those and create basically a media program descriptor with lots of different information. That information can be pushed into listing services like Titan and shared among content registration engines, which will then know what's being aired. We also utilize ad ID. So an advertising asset can be registered. Once an advertising asset's registered, we can then create rules around that ad ID. And that ad ID then allows us to, allows that content registry engine to say, hey, this linear feed includes an ad. Don't replace it, do replace it. And knows all the rules around it so that we can effectively create optimize our revenue stream. So basically, once this information's registered, it goes up into an automation system. One of the unique things about this process is the automation system can then basically update tags placed on the media. So if I have an EIDR and an ad ID, and I'm airing, let's say, a golf event, and that golf event goes into overtime. So the downstream devices, registries, guide services say, oh, I'm expecting entertainment tonight, but hang on a minute, we're going into overtime. This is very different. By using these registries and passing those registries both through our air chain and over the internet, we can then identify that, oh, this program is going to change. We can now say we're going to go to a different set of commercials. And at the same time, we can kind of select unique experiences for those downstream users. The system relies on both the outgoing data from the television station log and the use of that media by a downstream client, which is all the way over on the right. So you're watching this in an application. The application reports back that it's watching this service, it's watching this media, and these ads are going to be coming up. And the content replacement engine sitting below that, which would be represented by Freewheel or a service like Freewheel, can then select and pre-position the advertising assets that might be necessary and place them in line to be used in place of an ad that may air that was traditionally embedded in the linear service. That's basically the concept, but again, it relies on the clear registration of both the service, the program content, and the advertising assets. Thanks, Heidi.
Hi there. So I'm Richard Crone, Director of Technical Operations for EIDR, and I've been working in the audiovisual asset identification space for over 20 years, which may say more about my social life than anything. I'll start with BEEP, And so Jim's diagram of all the components and handoffs in the dynamic content switching workflow may have seemed mildly intimidating, but there's even more. There are things that happen before that in the process of acquiring the content. There were more parties involved, more handoffs, more touch points, and beep. Each one of those is an opportunity for a negative network effect. Because every time you've got two systems that have to talk to each other, there needs to be an interchange. There needs to be a common understanding between them as to what they're talking about, what the content is, where it's going, what it's being used for, etc. Without that identification as the core of your operation, you can't really automate. And on the next slide up, we have a lovely quote from Clyde Smith that sort of summarizes it all nicely. If you can't identify it, you can't operationalize or measure it. If you can't measure it, you can't monetize it. And I summarize this as, if you can't identify it, then what the hell? Because it really all does start with identification. If the two sides of an exchange don't know what they're talking about, then they can't act on it. You can't have automation. And you may have been able to use manual touch points in a workflow back in the day when you were presenting one piece of content at a time on one channel at a time. But that's not the business anymore. And so you can't rely on manual touch points. You can't rely on manual intervention. You have to have smooth, reliable, dependable automation to make all of this work. And so identification, let's talk about that. So EIDR IDs can be used to identify any kind of audiovisual content. EIDR IDs for movies, for TV shows, you can even do video games. Anything that has a audio-visual temporal component to it can have an EIDR ID for the asset in all of its forms. And so diving a little bit deeper into the EIDR ID itself. So it's a big, long honking number. Starts with 10.5240, which is the prefix that tells you that what follows is going to be an EIDR content ID. This is all part of the Digital Object Identifier standard, which is an ISO standard. And just to clarify, when it says Digital Object Identifier, it's technically a digital identifier of objects. It can be used to identify anything you want, analog or digital. But it will work for abstract, physical, digital assets, versions, encodings, whatever it happens to be, you can identify it. And you can see there's a lot of number space available, so we're not going to run out of numbers anytime soon. And then the structure of the registry, beep. Oh, sorry, I didn't realize this was a slide build. There we go, so structure of the registry. So you have an ID for works in the abstract. This could be Gone with the Wind in general. And then that ID can have any number of child edits or creative cuts, all the different versions of the work. So you got the original theatrical, you've got the 50th anniversary restoration, you've got the cut down for television version. And from that you can take clips. So there's a music program, Austin City Limits, that has every show registered, but then within the show, they've clipped out and identified the individual acts within the show. So if they want to then use those assets independently, they have an identifier to identify them. And then underneath that, each version or each can have encodings or manifestations of that thing. And if you need to, you can identify the individual tracks that compose those manifestations. So you can have a track of an encoding, of a version, of an episode, of a season, of a series. So all that can be chained together, and you can have as detailed as you need to be or as general as you need to be. So it depends on the application as to how detailed you may have to go. A lot of times people just stop at the abstraction. That's as far as I need to know. I need to know it's this episode of this show, I'm done, I don't need to know anymore. But if you do need to know more, you can identify deeper. So that's identifying the content. Next up is, how is the content being presented? Because for the dynamic content switching to work, you need to know not only the content, but the context in which it appears. And so there's the EIDR Video Service ID, which can identify any kind of content delivery mechanism: terrestrial, satellite, traditional broadcast, cable TV, OTT, all the various VODs. Any way you can get content out and deliver it to someone, that mechanism of delivery can have its own ID. So you can differentiate between something delivered over the air versus something streamed, the linear stream versus the VOD stream versus the catch-up TV, the version of it that was delivered to a third party that they delivered on their service. So no matter where it's coming from and how it's getting out, you can identify that unique place. And so it's done with the Video Service ID, which again starts with a prefix that identifies that this is going to be a Video Service ID, and then the body of the ID following. And then these are sort of just the overall milieu of all the different places within a broadcast enterprise you can use EIDR IDs, whether it be the content identifier or the video service identifier, and then in combination. So all the way from acquiring the content, whether you're producing or buying, to presentation of the content, to audience measurement, and all the way downstream, all these different exchanges, all these different interfaces between systems, between parties, between different groups and organizations can all be automated with unambiguous identification of the content and the platform on which it's delivered. Because without that identification that's enabling the automation, ultimately it's all just going to end in tears. And on that note, there you go.
Oh, thank you, Richard. I've already introduced myself, so I'm going to go a little bit into how MediaStar comes into this play. So Richard did a great job of telling you a little bit about what EIDR is and how it works. So that's where MediaStar comes into it. That's where we can, through our MediaStar tool, allow stations to go ahead and register them. Once they have that EIDR registered, we were able to send it then to traffic. It would follow from traffic to automation. And then, as Jim had talked about, if there's any last minute changes, automation can then push that information, program information, and EIDR number back into our MediaStar tool, which would then automatically update the ESG data service that then is entered into the broadcast chain down the road, which then the idea and goal is then the image that the consumer is seeing on their device matches the metadata that's coming through, so that EIDR number is then transported into the free will or content side to be able to add a placement. So with that, let me show you just a little bit how that would look inside MediaStar. So just to kind of give you an idea, I'm a pick on, let's say, I think Blue Bloods. So the idea is once we have a station come on board, we would do an initial setup and help sync all of their programs. So this would be initial. So here's one we've already synced. You'll see that EIDR number is already there. I don't have to worry about it. But let's say I have a new program, this All-American Handyman. It's a new fall program and I need to register it. So what I'm able to do is go into the program within MediaStar, go to the miscellaneous. You'll see that EIDR number has not been set yet. So we have built an integration between our system and EIDR, so you can go right through here to be able to search. So here I'm gonna go ahead and search for that EIDR number. I'm gonna do exact title. You can play around with it more if you don't want the exact title. Then it's gonna give me information here. I can, if I wanna go more information, is this really the right program? Kind of like we do today in our program library. I can click on details, and this is going to pull up all the information on that particular show. And if I say, yep, that's the correct one, I've set it, and now I have that EIDR information in it. And with that, if I would then quickly need to go ahead, let's say I need to insert that information right into my show. Let's say I'm gonna replace this one, and I'm gonna find that All-American Handyman. Let's say I'm gonna go full, hit save and now. And then soon as I go ahead and publish this day, just like as we do, it has now updated that ESG data service that's going out in the 3.0 so that when it connects to the end device, it has the correct EIDR number on it. And that's really MediaStar's part of it. It's small, but it's really impactful. And we're excited that it's going to be more workflow fluent with that. So just a reminder too, if you have any questions throughout this webinar, just go ahead and put them right into the comments and we will answer them as we go. But what we're going to go on to now is, we'll go on to Yona. It's all you.
Hi, everybody. I'm glad to be here, especially because I lost power for a moment there. I'm Yona Levinson. I'm the VP Group Director of Information Services at AddID, and AddID is the ID registry for ads. I'm also the founder of the Language Metadata Table, which is a media entertainment standard for standardized codes, and it's sponsored by Mesa Online as well as SMPTE, Society for Motion Picture Television Engineers. Before that, I was with Warner Media and HBO, as well as Pearson Education. One other thing that I do is I'm the co-founder, co-director, and instructor of the Rutgers University Digital Asset Management Certificate Program. Okay. So there are a lot of problems that exist today with ads. We know that there's a big escalation of more different kinds of viewing and everything that's going on. People want to reach more audiences, and there needs to be a good way to manage those ads across the screen. I think also talking to Richard's points with regards to the EIDRs, you know, that identifier is just so important. And there are problems now in that it can be very difficult, or in some cases impossible, for advertisers to know when an ad is run, and so they can't plan, they can't measure, and they can't optimize. Next. So Ad ID is a great solution to help solve these problems, because what I want you to take away from this is that no ad is complete unless it has an ad ID. We make sure that there's when you register with Ad ID, you can get a unique identifier for each and every ad, and that really helps move things along from an automation perspective and machine decisioning. People don't really want to be keying in, what ad do I want to put in now? It's all got to happen click, 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 and automatically. So if you have that Ad ID, you can move forward. And there's lots of people using it, and it replaced ISKI back in 2003. So we're nearly 20 years old. We are co-owned by the 4 A's and the ANA. Next. So I just wanted to point out here that there are many different places where there are integration points for the Ad ID. Ideally, it would happen at the beginning when you're creating, and even for an EIDR, I'll give a plug there, try and get it at the very beginning, because if you think about it, almost everybody gets some kind of ID for their content no matter what. So if you get it at the beginning, you don't have to create all these other IDs, you already got something good. Traditionally, the Ad IDs were used by traffic, but again, trying to see what's going on now with this digital landscape, you can see that it's really effective to have IDs earlier in the game. And then once that helps with the placement, and Jim and Heidi were talking about that a little bit. And if you know where the ad went, what was ran, and when it ran and all that kind of stuff, now you can start to measure, and then you can go into analytics, which is, one of the buzzwords, I think, for the past couple of decades. Next. Want to make sure that everybody really understands that Ad ID is about the what and the where. We're not interested in the who. That's really, that's coming from other areas, other organizations or companies are doing that. We really want to know about we want to know whatever we can about the ad, what's the name of the ad, you might want to know technical details about it, and we want to know where it was run. So if you have that hook, you can go. Briefly, and the structure of an Ad ID, it's 11 characters, and then there's an optional 12th. I'll show that in a moment. Every Ad ID has a prefix, which is a unique 4-character identifier, and that's license. And for the most part, we're using blocks so that we really know who's the advertiser of that for that ad. Next. So here's a sample. So usually you have the 11 characters, and sometimes you need a 12th if you need to indicate if something is high def or 3D. So there's the company prefix, A, B, C, D, and then there are the 7 characters in there that can be used, again, for that uniqueness, and then if you need the high def piece, or if nothing's on there, it's standard. Okay, so there's all different kinds of benefits, and there's many audiences for those benefits. So the consumer, we want to give the consumer the best experience they can, and so as there's more and more going on with ad placement and everything, we want to make sure now you have an opportunity to direct ads that are most relevant to the consumers, and so that makes a better experience for them. And marketers can really realize all different kinds of savings because they can manage the extra frequency, and they can respond quickly if there's something else going on. Maybe something ran late, so you have to switch things around. You need a shorter ad, longer ad, so you can just gotta have a bunch of stuff queued up. You're not colliding with anything because the ad IDs are unique. So that's delivers a much better brand experience, and then you can really measure that more effectively. Next. And even more benefits. So agencies, having an ad ID really helps with the planning and optimization. You get a lot more efficiency, and everybody wants to be able to take information back so they can measure, again, the analytics. And by having the ad ID and relying on it, it also reduces costs because you don't have to keep on reinventing the wheel. And it's a much better experience for the publisher because once again, they can they improve the machine decisioning. So again, the ad can be placed more quickly, And it also helps them keep an eye on what their inventory is. And now by having that ad ID, and there's all these different delivery mechanisms now, it's much easier to enable cross-platform measurement. So without an identity or an identifier, you can't manage, measure, or optimize your creative content. So we want to really improve traction there. Next. So Ad ID solves for these different kinds of problems. In here, there's more effective campaign management. It helps with the reach and frequency because you can really measure, and competitive separation. So this way, if you have more information about the ad, you're not going to have, the beer ad run right after the cookie ad or the other way around. You want a nice, cool glass of milk. And that, again, it helps with I keep going back to measurement because you really want to be able to grab that hook, make a better experience, and be able to act on it. Next. So best practices with an ad ID, you really want to make sure there is an ad ID that's on every creative asset included as part of your workflow. So that is a change, I think, for some people. You think you got your workflow nailed down, but let's add in this one little piece, but you'll be surprised at how it's going to make your experience better. If you include the ad ID code in VAST, there is already a field for it, so that can also help move things along, and your vendors can also help make sure that you include the ad ID. And one of the trends that's going on now is that the publishers, in many cases, they're starting to require ad IDs if you want to run ads in their content. So you might as well just go ahead and plan for it and make it part of your landscape. And then again, you've got those hooks and measure. So riding along the EIDR Richard Kroon whatever, you know what I mean. When you have both the EIDR and the ad ID, it's so effective because, again, now we get back to, we know what ad was run and we know where it was run because we have that hook back into the content. Thank you.
All right, I did it. I got the guy that didn't mute out of the way on the presentation. Thanks to the presenters that you guys have already gone through. I feel like you guys are all doing the heavy work, and when Freewheel comes into play, we're kind of the benefit of everything that you're doing is in regards to our clients. But a little bit about me. My name is Brett Angel. I'm the Senior Director for Client Solutions at Freewheel. Started my career out of college back in the 90s in master control at a local affiliate station in San Francisco, and then went into ad tech doing some of the infancy of interactive television. Then the dot-com bubble blew up and I went back into some television there for a little bit, and then starting in 2005, got on with a company doing addressable advertising for linear content, and I've been in that space ever since. And now through Comcast at Freewheel, kind of been working in ad tech for the last 20 years. A little bit about Freewheel, we can go on to the next slide. I only have one slide. Like I said, the presenters ahead of me are really doing all the work. But a little bit about Freewheel. So we do monetize advertising across a bunch of different distribution points. When Freewheel was originally founded, it was primarily in the digital space and monetizing those advertisements. But then in about 6 years ago or so, Comcast decided to spend a lot of money on ad tech companies. And so they acquired Freewheel, they acquired Visible World, which is one of the leaders in the linear addressable space, primarily on cable operators, as well as Strata. Boy, the list goes on of ad tech companies that they purchased. And then we all kind of came under the umbrella name of Freewheel and have been moving forward in that space ever since. So just a little bit here. This is a summary slide or a more condensed slide of what you saw earlier. So I won't really go through all of it, but you can kind of see the steps here from the way the order's created, the campaign's created. Our friends over at S&T get involved as far as creating the ad playlists and the back-end service, which helps communicate with us as an ad replacement engine. So as Jim and others kind of mentioned, as advertisements and content is marked, we can understand whether that content should or should not be replaced if it should be replaced, what should it be replaced with? And then that all benefits our downstream clients that are, or our downstream viewers that are seeing these advertisements. One thing I just wanted to add or plug, if you will, as a part of the solution, and the reason why I kind of feel like it's appropriate we're batting cleanup here a little bit is, right now we have several implementations of addressability. We represent programmers in their space. We represent cable operators and distributors, and then now with ATSC 3.0, we really have the opportunity to represent inventory that'll be played out on local broadcast and even potentially national broadcast and other opportunities there. But right now, the way everything is campaigned, the way everything is stewarded and run, it's all very siloed, right? I mean, everyone has their advertisement content identifier that's all in-house. It's all siloed, and it's fine for somebody that is going to just run and report on advertising that's executed and reported on within their siloed ecosystem. But you take an advertiser that's like, well, I want to run it on through several different operators. I want to run it through several different systems, and I want to get reporting back, and I want to somehow make sense of all that stuff that comes back. And without a unified way of identifying the content that comes back, it's a mess. Right now, it hasn't been as big of a deal because all of this is still in a bit of infancy. It's been taking a handful of years to get to where we're at today. But at the same time, it's kind of a one-to-one relationship. It's a content distributor. It's an advertiser working closely together in a very closed system. But now you look at an advertiser that wants to run in local broadcast and monetize and be able to take advantage of the technical capabilities and efficiencies, but they're going to run that same ad in several other areas, and being able to have that connective tissue to bring it all back into one aggregated reporting, simple, hey Ford, here's where your ad ran, and now we can tie other metadata to it because we have this definitive information. It really is a game changer, which is why, on the freewheel side, we're really excited to be a part of this POC that we've been going on. Unfortunately, of course, with COVID, we haven't been able to really get this out in front of you guys and show you all the great things that this technology can do, but we're hoping that very soon we'll be able to do that. But I think this, I thank you, Heidi, for putting this together. I think this webinar was a really good way to get that information out there to let everyone know that there's great progress being made in the space, and it's really going to help raise all the boats in the tide, as they say, to getting all of this done. So I think I'll be passing it back over to you, Heidi, and for the next steps.
Yes, so this is a time we're going to open it up for any questions that you have on any part of it, from the EIDR side, Ad ID to Freewheel to MediaStar, or just the overall concept of the project. So if you have any, go ahead and put them in the questions. Otherwise, I'm going to throw it back to our panelists. Do you guys have anything additional that you want to, hey, I should have said this, or let's dig a little bit deeper into this?
So Heidi, one comment. This could actually work in even ACIC 1.0, depending on how we did that. But the concept of providing those kind of markers out across even traditional MVPDs and all that it's quite possible. So, again, just really trying to take advantage of improving a live linear experience and also optimizing advertising potential is well worth the process.
So going back to first principles, the whole point of the dynamic content switching is to create a richer user experience, more engagement for the viewer, and more targeted and directed advertisement, which then is more viewers stay on, so you got more audience and you get more revenue. So at the end of the day, it's all about making more money, being more efficient, bringing more people to your service, keeping them there, and delivering the ads to them that are going to be best for them and for you. And it's all about doing that, and that sort of thing can't be done using old school traditional, ledger sheets, sending faxes kind of workflows. You have to have this integrated automation with all the parties playing together and understanding the same stuff.
I think it goes back to the Clyde Smith quote, you know, if you can't identify it, you can't operationalize or measure it. And if you can't measure it, you can't monetize it. So anybody knows me, I love metadata. I've been doing this for a long time. And the other part of this is I don't want to reinvent the wheel, and I don't want anybody else to have to reinvent the wheel. So if you've already got some kind of a standard that's out there, such as EIDR, such as ADD, and all these, and the addressable asset identification standard, and all these other ones, you know, different kinds of standards. I don't know all the names and numbers, but don't reinvent the wheel. Use what's already out there, because if you don't have a common hook that people can use across the whole landscape, you're stuck. And then you're going to have to go back and take it and convert it. That's going to cost you time and money. And now you also have to maintain mapping tables in between systems. So this way, when you go push your payload or your data from system A to system B, you have to map it. Somebody has to remember to do that, and it just goes on and on.
And I would add to that, I think as we're going through this project, I would think one of the things that we ran into with TitanTV is as we were integrating with other vendors on the channel. So one of the things I know Richard talked about was the video services identification. So actually giving a name to that actual, you know, your DT1, but what it's called over the air to what it's called in traffic to automation is all different, even to what it's called in ratings, you know, working with ComScore, and this is a 4-letter call letters versus we do it a DT1. I think that alone is not only going to help, you know, the industry, it's going to help the other vendors be able to connect, make it unified across the board. Doesn't matter what you call it versus what I call it. We're going to go off of the EIDR video services ID, and then it's unified throughout the entire system. I just think it makes it much easier to use, and I think it's easier for systems to now be able to integrate much quicker.
I think that there's another real opportunity as a device is sort of being metered for its activity. I know from at one point I was a sales guy, but it's hard for salespeople in the digital domain to really recognize what inventory is available in live linear, who's out there watching. In this case, because we have these clearly identified services, content, and advertising metrics coming back, we can dashboard that and really create what we call a skim, but the availability to say, oh, look, here's an opportunity for placement on this number of devices at this moment in time. And gosh, the character of the event just got more interesting. Now there's even more of those. And so I can essentially say, wow, look, you could put your ad right there. Isn't that neat? Now, if we automate that process a little more completely, especially with programmatic, we can really get into some you know, very complex and interesting ways to monetize media, but also just to place really unique content. If at some point I could correlate your geolocation or something like that with that program asset, I might even be able to enhance weather or other type of information for you as well. So really improving the quality of the application, the intrusion of the placement of advertising so it's less intrusive, more helpful, and other information. It all kind of becomes, you know, possible within this standardization. The idea would be to standardize the reporting piece of this as well, so it followed in the TIP reporting structure, which is another standardization for advertising compliance and reporting. Again, like as Yana was saying, align all of those touch points so that we're not constantly flipping and converting media descriptors, but actually have everything kind of fall into place.
Yeah. The one thing I'll add too is, you know, as we look at the kind of the broadcast space and where we're competing even with folks that are placing ads in digital space, and you know, the digital marketplace, they're getting reporting a lot faster. They can onboard their campaigns a lot faster than a lot of folks in the digital space can. And if they're, you know, to the point of the rest of the panelists, that they're using spreadsheets and mapping tables and everything else to try to get these results back, it just takes extra time. It's like, yeah, we can tell you how well your campaign ran next week, right? Like that doesn't do an advertiser any good if they're trying to be more dynamic and work in a fast pace and say, okay, well, I need to make corrections here or move content over here or do this or that. It just slows it all down. And this, having this kind of efficiency is gonna bode well for everybody.
Yeah. The other thing that we probably should consider, a lot of at least local news is repurposed as a VOD asset after the live linear airing. In this case, our intention would be to capture and include these program descriptors in a replay. So if you were watching, say, a sunrise newscast at 10 o'clock at night, because that's the better time for you, to the downstream replacement engine, you would look like a live linear broadcast, and you would be contextually on the right service in the right program, and therefore you could be provided a better experience. But again, everything's just neatly tied together, and it doesn't matter if you're on your mobile or your television set. It's you're the same person watching the same content at the same time, and we can make sense of it.
And we did have a question come in. It's actually a multi-part, so I'll throw it out first. So they want to know, do they need to pay for access to either EIDR or ad ID services, or is this something that's being offered to everyone who uses MediaStar? So I'll start with Richard. Will there be a cost for EIDR?
So the EIDR service, both video service and content identifiers, is and always has been read for free. So anyone can use any of the IDs that are there for any purpose. You don't have to be a licensed customer to use the IDs as you do with some other identification services. That's what EIDR is always described as, an open, globally unique, curated identifier system. And the read for free part is important. So the only thing where there's a restriction is on who can register the IDs, who can create them up front. And that's done both to maintain data quality, to make sure that they're good quality registrations, not just random stuff going in there, but also, to keep us running, because we are an industry nonprofit. So it's only on the registration side of it. And that can be done by EIDR members, by third-party service providers who are providing some other sort of service and having EIDR identification included in that, through retail registration agencies, going and get IDs individually. So it just depends on your operation, how you might mint a new ID if the ID you need isn't already there. But in the example you showed where the ID was already there, you just grab the ID and you move on. There's no barrier to using an ID once it's been minted.
And then as far as MediaStar, again, just as long as you, like Richard said, if you need to register, you'll need to work with them on that. We have the connection. There's no additional cost within MediaStar. Now, related to ad ID, I'm going to hand that to Yona.
There is a cost for the ad IDs, and it does depend on what level and the quantity that you'll be using. But we want to make sure that the costs are reasonable, but we also have to make sure we can keep our doors open. So that's a big piece of it there.
And the second part of that, is it compatible with wide orbit traffic? So I can tell you from the MediaStar side, that is one of the things that we're working on within the standard, is be able to then electronically send the program title, some simple description like the episode number and the EIDR number to wide orbit or any traffic system so they can ingest it in. And then I'll have Brett talk on the ad ID side.
Yeah, so right now, we use other things like break IDs and things like that. So as we start to migrate and adopt the ad ID through the freewheel system, we'll be cleaning out the pipes and making sure that those will pass through, but there's no additional cost to leverage any of that.
But there are multiple ways of embedding the IDs. SCUDI has standard mechanisms for embedding IDs in their standards. SMPTE has standards for identifying it. So there are various places you can squirrel away the different identifiers to make sure that they're durable in whatever workflow you're using, whether it be directly in the media or in metadata sidecars.
And I don't think that the wide orbit would contain all of this metadata. I think it would really contain the IDs and maybe some duration and other information. That information would be augmented by the registry services and then linked all the way out to even something like Redby Media or something else that may contain even a deeper understanding, or even somebody like a MetaHow who might even have more information. So you know, as you start to look at, gosh, I'd like to know more about this specific program asset. What's the anchor do for fun? Do they ski or whatever? You could create a fully enhanced link through from that simple ID all the way out to that. You could have a product ID where you could link to a web page about the product or a long form video about the vehicle or something else you're interested in. So this simple ID, as simple as it seems, takes you on this long tour through all kinds of different metadata and registries and experiences, and really improves that. But White Orbit is, by the way, part of the team working on this, as everybody else is listed, and really trying to explore how best to integrate these things and make them ergonomic, both from the operational side and from the user side.
I think it's a good point just to build on that a little bit more with regards to the registration by having so with metadata, I like to have what I call MVM or minimum viable metadata. So sometimes you need just enough to get it started. Can you get it from point A to point B? Is there enough information for scheduling, etc.? But if you think about it, if you put these IDs on at the beginning, most likely I would hope that the agency or whoever is creating the ad, they have some idea who their audience is, what the product is that they're going to advertise. They already have that information. So if you start being consistent, capture that information up front and throw it along with the rest, you know, as more metadata that's associated with your ad ID, then it's just a richer experience and there's a lot more to work off of.
Yeah, and in the EIDR registry, along with the descriptive metadata record, we also carry other identifiers. So we'll have the house IDs from the studios. You know, if it was produced by Disney or Paramount or whatever else, their house ID could be there. Third-party data aggregator IDs, you know, IMDb ID, Common Sense Media ID for parental advisory ratings. So there's various other identifiers you can link to. So it's not just you get the EIDR ID and stop, but it as Jim was saying, it opens up a whole world. There's a whole world of linked data out there. And the trick is getting linked, getting the ID to start you into that world of linked data.
And I think that helped answer her question. Are there any other questions out there? We've got about 12 minutes left. Does anyone else on the panelists have any other thoughts, feedback you want to provide?
I'll say this, you know, we spoke to Scotty, we spoke to other things, but I know that there are other watermarking standards and different ways that media experiences are being enhanced. And this system should be seen as a cross-platform and unified way to organize media, regardless of whether you're using an OBID watermark, a Scotty, it doesn't, you know, an X-Link, it's not based around a specific technology, but more around the content, purely around the content and the service, to make that all function. So this shouldn't be seen, you know, in that as it's just tied to this product or that product. It's really truly being proposed as a universal way to manage media across multiple platforms and distribution types.
Well, I'm not seeing any other questions come in. And it's just a reminder, again, we will be sending out an email to everyone with a copy of the link to the video. I will also include everyone's contact of our panelists here. So if you have additional questions for each individual one of them, you want to ask, get deeper into the ad ID, to the EIDR side, to Freewheel, you can feel free to reach out to them directly. So just stay tuned to that email. And again, we will also put it up on YouTube so you can then share it to others. Any last wise words before we call it a day?
I'll just add that it's really important to start thinking now about what your workflows could be if you do this and start planning. Some companies that I've worked in, they do like 1, 3, 5-year strat plans. So this way you can start budgeting, because those system upgrades, if you have to make any changes or if you're planning to update your systems in the first place, it's a wonderful opportunity to start adding it. Make sure you have the metadata fields for these additional identifiers. And in the meantime, if you think about it with your current workflow, and you can add in some of this additional metadata, you can probably calculate, just ballpark figures as far as what your savings might be, and that may also help justify system, updates or replacement systems.
And by the way, Heidi, I wanted to make sure one thing. Our ads on TV are free to watch for everyone. Anyone can watch our ads for free, just so you know.
There is a couple more questions that came in kind of related to that EIDR and wide orbit. Says, when will it be able to be used in, when will EIDR be able to use in wide orbit? I don't know if we have. Brittany, I guess the best thing is I'd say is once we have an update on that, yes, we'll probably do another webinar as far as their integration and their involvement in this. And that's where we could also, there's a whole other part of this workflow that's not even included with the panelists that are on here. That could be a whole separate webinar that we can also go over at that time too. So just stay tuned for more news and updates on this particular project, this standard, as we continue to build it out. I know this is something that we are looking to really showcase and demo at NAB 2022 in April. So hopefully that all goes on. So again, just stay tuned for the newsletters, and we'll make sure that we keep everyone up to date as this project continues to progress and we are able to get additional of the integrations in and show you the entire workflow. With that, I want to thank my panelists today for coming on and being part of this webinar series with TitanTV. And I want to thank all of our attendees for coming and providing all your thoughts and feedback. If there are other webinars that you want to know or you want to get deeper into anything, just let us know and we'll add it to our list of webinars to do. So thank you again, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Have a great weekend.